everybody. My name is Simran Joswal. I'm the Campus Education and Outreach Coordinator from the Safe Center, LI. Today, we are presenting the intersection of the Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. Today, our speakers are Amanda Cohen and Corinne Giordano. Our first question today for our speakers are, what do you want people to know about the intersection of sexual assault and child abuse? Amanda, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Simi. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today with us. So to jump in, just wanted to give you a quick stat that every 68 seconds, someone in the United States is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. Now, granted, those are just what we know of, but today, Corinne and I are going to talk about the intersection of those two issues. And really the things that we want you to know is that these are things that are interwoven, right? And at the Safe Center, we treat the whole person, the whole family, and we know that they may be impacted by more than one type of trauma. And so there's oftentimes in a family unit where there may be sexual violence that's been experienced by either a parent in childhood who now is raising a child who is more vulnerable to abuse, or there may be multiple forms of abuse happening to different people in that family at a different time. So we know that it's often perpetrated by people that the survivor knows, right? That this is happening within people's intimate circles, their colleagues, their friends, could be their partner, a peer at school, right? This is happening within people's close social circles. And it's not, one of the myths that we have around these issues is that it's this like person that drives up in a white van, right, and scoops you off the street, when oftentimes that is not the case. That actually accounts for about 20% or less of those cases in the case of adult sexual violence cases. The other thing we like you to know is like the age groups that it impacts. And so most oftentimes the highest risk age group is ages 12 to 34, right? So we're talking about like a group of minors here, which Corinne's going to speak to more. But we know that this issue these issues don't discriminate, right? They can impact anybody. There are certainly groups that are more likely to be impacted by them. We have individuals in the BIPOC communities, the LGBTQ communities, people who are incarcerated are at a higher risk. And there's a lot of sexual violence that happens in our armed forces that unfortunately goes underreported most of the time. And so these are issues that are facing our community every day. And sexual assault in adults, particularly, while it does mainly impact people who identify as female, there are also a lot of male victims that, because of the stigma around sexual violence for men, some shame, right? There might be some kind of embarrassment about coming forward about those things. We know that the numbers around males experiencing these issues is a lot higher than what, is really reported. So Corinne, I don't know if you want to speak a little about the child abuse aspect.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. I think similarly, as Amanda started saying, there is often more than one type of abuse occurring in the home for the child. Here at the Safe Center, we see a lot of children who've experienced child sexual abuse. And one big thing that intersects with the sexual assault of adults is that dispelling this myth of the stranger danger, right? We know that in over 90% of the cases, the offender is somebody that the child knows and that the family knows, and therefore it really impacts the entire family. That person potentially has built trust, not only with the child, but with the caregivers in order to have that isolated relationship with the child. This can be really difficult for the family to overcome in learning and post-disclosure about who may be hurting the child and how that's going to now affect the whole family as a unit. That also leads to delayed disclosure, right? Like sometimes the kids can internalize that idea of knowing how that this person is, in a high regard with the adults in their life. So maybe they feel like the adults won't believe them. Maybe they feel that this is going to change where they have to live, that it's going to really upset their parent, that they maybe could tolerate the abuse because they don't want to tolerate the other family members being distressed. Something else that we know is that any child with a disability is 2 to 3 times more likely to be the victim of abuse. And those are our vulnerable populations. Those are the kids we really have to look out for, because it can be very confusing. They're not able to maybe articulate what they're experiencing. They can't kind of see the grooming happening, and they might be in facilities. So in residential treatment, in long day camp situations where they need these services, but unfortunately it then puts them at higher risk to be sexually abused.
Thank you, Amanda and Corinne, for those answers. For our next question for our speakers, what are some of the challenges in addressing these issues? Amanda, would you like to start again?
Thank you, Simi. So one of the major challenges with even the data that we have on these issues is that it really only accounts for those who actually make a report, right? So it's really hard to get a good grip on what this issue looks like and how it affects different individuals and families and groups, because we're really only accounting for the person that either came forward to police, had an investigation like a mandated report situation initiated, or some other way was recorded. Sometimes it includes hotline calls, things like that, or self-identified individuals through other means. But we really are still learning a lot about these issues, and there's a lot of limitations to kind of the stats and figures that even we've shared with you today. So that's certainly one of the challenges, is that we're still learning what the full scope of it is, so that we can serve people and we can help them in the way that they need, and that we can bring the services to them if they're not already being served. The other thing that's a real challenge, particularly with the adult sexual violence, is that most survivors are not going to go to the police. They're not going to ever report their incident. And so many people are not getting the justice that we see on TV, that we see in the movies, right? Of that 40-minute SVU episode where they make a disclosure, they go to the hospital, there's an interrogation, and that person's in a courtroom getting sentenced by the end of the episode. And that survivor walks away getting that really cookie cutter criminal justice response and conclusion to their case. Oftentimes survivors are left with a lot of confusion and a lot of kind of a lack of choices, because there's only so much that can be done in these cases criminally. One of the things that we kind of need in a criminal investigation is for there to be like a timeline of events. And because of the way that trauma impacts our memory and our emotion regulation, survivors are often not telling a perfect chronological story that would support what is needed in a criminal investigation, right, to actually bring charges against somebody. And so we have to do other things to support a survivor through that, and also be able to explain to them what the limitations are to reporting and to some of the criminal justice response around these cases. These are also not crimes that have victims oftentimes, so they're often really relying on the victim's testimony. Oftentimes an offender isn't walking into a police station, right, to confess to a crime like this. So it's often what the survivor says and what they share as their experience. And while they may get a medical exam that might help to corroborate some of what they say, there's often not medical certainty in those exams to be able to prove. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the survivor to be able to kind of tell and retell their story at all the different phases of the criminal justice process. And so sometimes survivors aren't taking that route for that exact reason. The other thing is that the interaction with these systems, right? So they report it, they go to the hospital. These are all really large systems that, while there's been a lot of progress made towards making them more trauma informed, it's traumatizing, right? It's traumatizing to interact in these systems and have to figure out what the next right thing is. And that's where the Safe Center comes in. But those are some of the challenges in adult cases, and Corinne will speak a little bit about some of the challenges which can be similar and different in the child abuse cases.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. For the child cases and the system response, we have child advocacy centers where we're trying to reduce that traumatic impact on the family when there has been a case of specifically for Nassau County of child sexual abuse or severe physical abuse. We have the opportunity for them to, come here to the Safe Center, for all the investigative partners to be on site, collaborate, to really hopefully reduce the impact. We have a child abuse pediatrician that we can consult with that can do exams for the kids and for the families. Unfortunately, what we find too is that when the kids, even if they're coming to the Child Advocacy Center, one challenge is that it was kind of an accidental disclosure. So with some social media, with kids having phones and iPads and devices, there's times where an adult or a parent will stumble upon the abuse in text messages, or they'll have it pop up on their own device, or they'll find pictures, and the child now has to kind of come through the system in a whirlwind. And we want to be sensitive to that for them as well. They, Amanda spoke a little bit about like the neurobiology of trauma, and we're not going to get that clean affect, right? We're not going to get a kid who seems sad and solemn and tells us that full story about what happened start to finish. We have forensic interviewers who are working with that child to assist them in building out that start to finish story that is going in order. However, sometimes a child might be laughing through that interview, they might be smiling, and this is an attempt to self-regulate, right? Like they're having really negative feelings coming up, but it is recorded and it is, kind of evidence. And they're also young, so we need that corroboration. I think our investigative partners really want to do a good job for these kids, but because they're minors, they also need some more evidence to back up the story. And because of the grooming and isolation, we don't always have that, and they can go for those medicals, but often, and I think this is a misconception, and it is a challenge for our investigations and for supporting the family, is that there are no physical findings in these exams. The body heals itself. Often it's allegations that don't include something that could be obvious on a physical exam or that's going to produce any biological evidence. As we said, this more often than not, it's the delayed disclosure. So it may have happened a few weeks, months, years ago, and we still want to hear their story. We still want them to have the opportunity to come to a place and be heard. But it does pose a challenge kind of for them to move forward. And that can feel for the child and the family like, I've gone through all this and now there's no next step for me, or I just want, something to happen. I just want this person, or they could have a really good story with a lot of evidence and say, oh, I don't want that person to be arrested. I just want them to stop hurting me, or I just want them out of my home. And then that can be, a challenge sometimes for the family. But we are, here trying to help and provide whatever support possible through services or with our investigative partners, but really, want families to know that we can hear whatever they have to say.
Thank you, Amanda and Corinne. For our next question for our speakers, what services are offered for survivors of sexual assault and child abuse? Corinne, would you like to start first?
Sure, thanks, Simi. So here at the Safe Center, we are a multi-service, comprehensive, trauma-informed agency treating survivors of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. So for children, we have a Nassau County's Child Advocacy Center. This is a multidisciplinary team approach to investigations of child sexual abuse and severe physical abuse. That just means that we have a team for the families located here at the Safe Center. And that's a specialty of our specific CAC, is that here we have on-site specialized units of Child Protective Services. We have Nassau County PD's Special Victim Squad co-located with us. We have a Deputy Bureau Chief from the ADA's office who's specializing in child abuse here present on site. As I mentioned before, we have a board-certified child abuse pediatrician available for consult, and also here doing exams for our kids once a week. We also have the services that are under the Safe Center umbrella. They're Safe Center employees, our forensic interviewers who specialize in providing developmentally appropriate interviews to these children in a really specialized way. That's all that they do. They have continuous education around that. We have our victim advocates and case managers, and they're here for the families from the moment they come in throughout the entire process, no matter where that, it's a non-time limited service. They can see them all the way through prosecution, which right now sometimes can be a few years. Honestly, but it doesn't have to go that way. It's what the family's decision. If they wanted to move forward, if they didn't, they could still continue to have that support of that advocate or case manager. We have children's mental health services. This is a specialized counselors here at the Safe Center, and they provide individual and group services to not only to the child, but also the siblings or secondary survivors and support groups for the parents. We also have a, outside of the Child Advocacy Center, just as a Safe Center program, very robust community education around prevention of child abuse and education. Our education department is out there in school districts, places of worship, businesses, really spreading all the education around Erin's Law, bullying, child sexual abuse, mandated reporting. So really critical information that we're sharing. Amanda, did you want to add?
Yeah. So thanks, Corinne. So similar to the way that we approach child abuse issues here at the Safe Center, while there may not be a formal multidisciplinary team that's in place to address adult cases, we still use that model when we're addressing those cases whenever possible. And obviously with the full consent of the adult survivor we're working with, that we can still provide advocacy, case management, and collaboration around a criminal investigation, an active prosecution. The survivor might be in family court, needs some support around that. So we're really working with those investigative partners, with the prosecutors, and then with any other community partners that a particular survivor might be working with, to really make sure that we're, again, treating the whole person and not just the issue that they're presenting with. So that includes services both provided through the Safe Center as well as working collaboratively with the partners. Some of the services that we offer are individual and group counseling through our rape and sexual assault department. We do provide adult victim advocacy and case management, which again is not time limited, right? It's really there to address chronic issues, to help people understand their rights and options when it comes to like reporting to the police, getting medical exams, and really what supports and services are available, right? If we're not the right place for them to get services, let's link them somewhere that they can get those. And also helping with things like just basic needs, right? So we do have a 24-hour hotline. Survivors can call themselves. They can have a loved one call. If you're working with a survivor as a professional, you can call the hotline to find out more about how to refer somebody here. And that they can really sometimes help to give some of that initial support and resources in the aftermath of a disclosure, or when that person is ready to, kind of share this with with whoever they want to, and get the support around that. So we can arrange things like emergency safe housing in certain situations. We do have some pretty robust housing services that are a little bit more long-term if the survivor qualifies. And we also have a full legal department of attorneys and paralegals that work in the various issues that impact the survivor. So things like family court, Supreme Court with divorce proceedings, custody and visitation, immigration cases. So we really just try to really look at what the survivor needs, find the gaps in service, and then fill those gaps with the supports that the survivor feels is going to be the best for them in that moment.
Thank you, Amanda and Corinne. For our last question for today's event, we would like to ask, how can people help? Corinne, would you like to start?
Thanks, Simi. I think our first and foremost, right, we want people to believe victims, right? Believe these children, believe these individuals when they tell you something has happened to them. Secondly is in the case of children, like, be a good adult. So be somebody who's trustworthy, be somebody who models appropriate boundaries with children, who listens to them, who, really talks to kids and acts responsibly. I think that is the most important thing that any person can do. If they want to, help a little extra, we have our CAPS program through education, which is always looking for volunteers. If child abuse prevention is something that's important to you and you have the time and you can volunteer, it's free training, flexible scheduling, and it's a really great way to go out into the community and let people know how important this issue is. And specifically when it comes to talking to kids, right, about telling somebody, about knowing their boundaries. I think we always need people who are willing to do that for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can also start, by sharing our post here today. You can follow our media pages. We do have many volunteer opportunities here. Corinne mentioned the CAPS program. We also have our Survivor Advocate for Emergency Response program, which is the advocacy services that happen within the emergency rooms throughout Nassau County. So if a survivor presents to the hospital, there's an advocate there to help walk them through those initial phases of making a disclosure and getting a medical exam. And potentially reporting to police if they want to. And that's for all types of survivors. So that's child abuse, human trafficking, rape, sexual assault for adults, as well as domestic violence across the lifespan. So certainly we would love to see, people signing up for those programs to make more of an impact in their communities and really spreading this awareness and really making sure that we're having candid conversations about how this impacts us. Because more than likely, if you're sitting in a room full of people, you or someone in that room has been impacted by this in some way, shape, or form. So we really welcome you to our all of our social media pages, our website, and just make sure that you are being a trusted person in someone's life. If somebody discloses to you, stay calm, believe them, listen to them, and let them know that help's available, right? Give them our hotline number, direct them to our website, direct them to any service that might be helpful to them. And you might want to suggest that they get that medical care right away and that they, really start reaching out for support.
Thank you, Amanda and Corinne, for taking the time to speak to us about these important issues. This helps us bring awareness to sexual assault and child abuse. Now, I'd like to take the time and opportunity to highlight some of the events the Safe Center will be hosting this month to bring awareness to sexual assault and child abuse. The first event, we are partnering up with PFY. The event is called Sexual Violence in the LGBTQ plus community, a conversation with PFY. It will be hosting on April 25th at 2:30 via Zoom. We will be having Maria DeMauro from PFY and once again, Amanda Cohen from the Safe Center for this event. You can register with the QR code at the bottom of the screen. Next, we will be having a live book reading with the author Yolanda Garner Hutcherson. The book is called Shanti's Safe Place. The date it will be happening on is April 29th, time 12 p.m., location Port Washington Public Library. It will be a live book reading of the author, followed by a brief Q&A, and some staff from the Safe Center will be there to answer any questions for the children and parents. Once again, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate the public joining us today to help us highlight the intersection of Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. On the screen, you can see our different social media handles, our website, and our hotline number, which is 516-542-0404. Thank you once again, and my name is Simran Joswal, and this is the Safe Center.